Hi, I'm Jayden, and I am protector among many other things in Collective Mind, and I'm going to talk about some of the reasons that trauma can be invisible to people around you, especially to people around you, because amnesia and dissociation and things like that can make it also invisible to the person it's happening to. Even in singlets, there can be dissociative amnesia surrounding trauma in singlets as well, but especially in systems. But something that can be hard for a lot of people is how other people around them could have not known. One thing I want to say before I get into that is that there are also situations where people know and for whatever reason don't do anything about it. That's different from the things I'm talking about today, but because that can be rooted in a lot of things. That can be not thinking it's wrong for whatever reason, not thinking it's a problem, not thinking it's like your place specifically to do anything about it, being too scared to do something about it, not thinking that like anything can really actually be done to help them, or that the things that would be done to help would be worse. But the things that I want to talk about are two main categories. The reasons people around you might not see or notice signs or like interpret signs correctly as trauma symptoms or red flags of trauma or abuse or anything like that. Why people miss or misinterpret those, and why people don't tell people around them that things are happening. Which I guess for that part of it, it's also important to point out that there are situations where people do tell people and nothing happens as a result of that anyway. But again, that's not what I'm focusing on for this video. So one of the big reasons people might miss or misinterpret signs that someone around them is dealing with trauma is the fact that it can be really hard to think about those things and face that kind of a reality, which gets into concepts like cognitive dissonance, of how many other things you have to kind of face and accept in order to face that one thing. And because of that, because of how hard and overwhelming and emotional that would be, your brain like actively pushes against it and points you away essentially from looking at what the problem is because it would be too hard to face. Cognitive dissonance is especially true if people would feel like personally guilty about it. So if it's someone in your life going through these things who you feel a responsibility to protect, if you are like a caregiver to them in some way, or you feel like you should have known those signs sooner, or you feel some other kind of personal responsibility for whatever reason. Maybe you introduced that person to the person who traumatized them, or whatever. If you would have to face that feeling, however accurate or inaccurate it might be, if you would have to face that feeling personally, that you like failed to protect them or helped to cause those bad things to happen to them, or whatever else you feel like personally responsible for, if you would have to face those feelings, there can be a lot of cognitive dissonance around that. And cognitive dissonance is not an active process in your brain. It happens behind the scenes and it stops you from facing it. In the same way that like dissociation, dissociative amnesia like points you away from looking at signs of your own trauma and stuff. In a similar vein, it could be something that is like the situation could essentially be that the signs that you're seeing are triggering to you. So the signs that you're seeing that something is going on with someone else are triggering you in such a way that you're dissociating and not processing them, or have amnesia about them after the fact, or give you flashbacks that make you so focused on your own personal experiences that you don't relate them anymore to the person who is having those red flags now that you noticed, those types of things. But there's also a very, very common issue of a lot of trauma symptoms can be too normalized or like explained away as other things, like just depression or just anxiety. Not to minimize those things, but if you're explaining away things that in that case are actually a result of trauma and thinking that they are anxiety or depression without trauma, it makes you less likely to look for any potential trauma cause because you're not labeling it as a trauma symptom. And this can also apply to physical signs, like any physical signs of abuse, for instance. If you expect what you think are like the more common causes of things like that, if you think that they just fell or it was rough play on the playground or whatever, and you just kind of explain it away like that, some of these things can also be encouraged by two big things. One is anybody who's involved, who knows what's actually happening and is trying to make sure you don't find out about it, would be encouraging you to see it in this way, might be the person who fed you that story in the first place, or is just emphasizing it to you now. But the other big one is that our society generally does some minimizing and like mislabeling of symptoms like that, and will talk about trauma-related things like they are uncommon, which is not true. So that overall societal mentality can make people less likely to expect trauma to be a cause. Something I forgot to say about something that can make it hard for people to face the idea that those types of things happened is also related to that societal thing that I just said of expecting trauma to be much less common than it is. Trauma and especially abuse. And I would say probably especially child abuse. But it can be a lot less likely for your mind to go there if you can't imagine someone doing those things. So if that is just like the most horrifying thing that you can think of, it is really, really hard to like allow yourself subconsciously, this wouldn't be a conscious choice, to consider the possibility that someone you know could be going through that, and especially that someone you know could be perpetrating that in cases like abuse. So that can be really, really hard for your brain to even let you think about that as a possibility. Another thing that can happen in some cases is any signs that you see, you will assume they're related to something that you do already know about, whether that is a specific traumatic thing that you do know happened, but you know or think that it's over, and you assume that any like lingering symptoms are just based on that, because that in a lot of cases could be true, but because of that you're not looking for any like new trauma to be causing those things. But there can also be like there can be more normalized sources of stress and trauma in some cases that are like known and expected. Like if you know that a kid is like having school related stress of some kind, dealing with bullying or having trouble with their grades or whatever, and those are normalized things that you know are hard, and you just assume that that's what's causing whatever symptoms they're having. Or like if you just moved and you think that that's got to be the thing that's stressing them out so much. Things like that. Not to say that those things aren't bad by any means, but they're considered like more normal types of stress that a lot of people in your life would already know about. Not always, but especially something like moving. Generally, a lot of people in your life are going to know that you moved, and they know that that's stressful and can be hard. But then the other big thing, again, to come back around to it, is in cases where there are perpetrators, they are often intentionally covering things up. They very, very often preemptively do a lot of gaining trust, or had a lot of trust already with like major people in your life, especially like caretakers, especially with children. But they can also be really good at making excuses using some of those same things I was just listing. Or, you know how hard it is to be a kid that age, or whatever. Make excuses and minimizing what those symptoms are, emphasizing like the areas where they're not having trouble and how normal it is to have nightmares every once in a while, like to minimize it like that intentionally, to make it seem silly, to make a big deal out of it, basically. A lot of perpetrators can be really good at gaslighting, and it can make it seem like it's ridiculous for you to even worry about like such small normal things like that and whatever else. The other side of perpetrators intentionally covering it up is in the second big category of the reasons the victims themselves who are dealing with trauma or abuse or whatever might not share that with anybody or ask for help, because perpetrators in a lot of cases will make very clear that they're not supposed to, using threats or shaming them or all kinds of other things. Of even if it's not direct threats, something that I know can be really common is telling, like giving them consequences to expect that they wouldn't personally cause. So like saying that this list of horrible things would happen if you told anybody, like you would go to jail and so would I, and so would this list of 12 other people, and you'll never get a job and you'll never get married and whatever else, like things like that, that they're not saying that they're going to personally do those things to you, they're just saying that's what would happen if anybody found out. But also doing a lot of gaslighting and minimizing in that case too, of telling you that you're overreacting and this is normal, and or you deserve it, or both, or any of those things, or telling you that people wouldn't help you if you asked for whatever reason, that they already know about it and are okay with it, or whatever. Like there are all kinds of things that you can say in a case like that to try to get people to not tell anybody. But there can also be, even without that, a lot of inherent fear of how people will react, especially in cases related to abuse, because you can expect that maybe whoever you ask for help is going to be just as abusive or even worse. And now suddenly you just have another abuser on top of it. But there can also be a lot of inherent shame, even if there isn't someone like specifically shaming you about it. Like I was saying with the perpetrator, there can be a lot of inherent shame of thinking that people will not look at you the same, or make fun of you directly, or it'll take away opportunities in your life, etc., etc. Also, just generally amnesia, like I said, is in systems and also with singlets. Amnesia can get in the way of telling people. Like in our case, the people in our system who were the most likely to be around the trustworthy people in our life were the ones who didn't know about the trauma. So they couldn't have told those people, and those of us who knew about it, if we weren't fronting, couldn't tell them. So that can absolutely get in the way of it. There's also just generally not trusting the people who are available to help, which is sometimes based in evidence that they would actually be untrustworthy if you have reason to think that they would not respond well. And there can be a lot of reasons you would think that. But you could also be convinced of that, like, even if it's not true, which was also something that was the case with us. And just general trust issues can be really common in situations like that too. But another big thing in our case was a big part of my job was keeping the secret. For a lot of these reasons, but in cases of systems, that can be pretty common if there are alters intentionally fighting very, very hard to make sure nobody tells anybody anything. And that was one of the things that I did. And I could forcefully switch with people if they seemed like they were about to say something. And I had strong persecutor reactions, I'll put it that way, to people suggesting that we tell anyone, or seeming like they were going to, or anything like that. It is also possible, even without like a perpetrator trying to convince you of this, for you to just on your own, essentially, as part of your response to whatever trauma you experienced, to believe that it's normal, or you deserved it, or you're overreacting to whatever happened, and you would be like made fun of or whatever for making a big deal out of it. I guess I should also point out that there are less like defendable reasons, I guess, for people to not see or notice signs. Like, there are very bad reasons that people miss signs and genuinely miss them, but like based in neglect, for instance, like they don't know anything about their kid or whoever it is because they're never around, or just don't get personally involved in their life at all, and so they wouldn't see signs because of that, because they don't know any of the other things going on in their life either. That kind of thing. But this list was more so going into a lot of the common things that are like not your fault, that could get in the way of it. Well, I've gone through my whole outline, and I think that's about as much as I can continue talking about this before I just start dissociating a bunch, so I'm going to wrap it up here. If you liked this video, please click the like button to tell us and YouTube that you did, and also make sure you're subscribed and that you've clicked the notification bell to see all of our future videos. You can leave us comments if you have any thoughts or questions or anything like that, but also if you have any suggestions for future videos for us to make. That is very helpful if you have things you want us to talk about. And we do read and respond in some way to all of our comments. But you can also put things like that on Discord if you prefer, which is linked in the description, along with a bunch of other things like our Twitch channel, where we do more chill gaming live streams and then repost them here on YouTube afterward, and our wishlist and Etsy shop and Patreon. I think those are all the big things. For Patreon, if this video is going up in April still, which I think it probably will, we are doing a special offer for this month on Patreon, where if you join or are already a patron by the end of the month, you'll get an extra bonus perk of a playlist of little clips of our service dog Charlie, who was on my lap throughout the video, trying new foods for the first time, which are really cute little clips of her doing that. And like I said, that's linked in the description for you to sign up or see what all of the other perks are and things like that. And we will put other videos and things on the screen, including the playlist of videos we've made about trauma-related things specifically. And I think that is everything. So thank you for watching. Bye.